Hello, everyone. I am Dawn Y. Graber, and I am the founder of Dawn, and I work with supporting senior women executives and working with their businesses to help cultures thrive for women and therefore everyone. And I'm coming to you today in honor of International Women's Day. It is Sunday, March 8th, and today's the 5th. But I thought we could mix it up a little bit today. And instead of just talking about items that often women pop on for and women want to learn about, what would it be to talk to the men on International Women's Day or now in preparation for Sunday, International Women's Day? And so this conversation is especially for men in seats of power, power being influence. The role you have just gives you some influence. So if you're the CEO or a founder or a board member or any sort of decision maker, well, and you've thought, I don't know how things are for women in my organization. I think it's okay, but I'm not exactly sure. And I'm not sure what to do about it. Well, this conversation is for you then, because culture doesn't just shift from good intentions, it shifts from informed leadership. This sense of trying, of attempting, of commitment. I work with leaders who deeply care about building workplaces where women thrive, but many of them quietly admit, I don't know what I don't know. And that's not a weakness, that's awareness. But it's a weakness if we don't do something about it. So we're here today with two new special friends to be able to talk about that. We're going to talk about what comes next. I'm really thankful and excited to share this time with David Smith and Brad Johnson on the screen. We will introduce them just shortly. They are authors of a book. I remember exactly where I first read this book. It's called The Good Guys and How Men Can Be Better Allies for Women in the Workplace. They've written a different book together, Athena Rising, about mentorship. And I know they have a new one coming out down the pike that they're excited about that we'll make sure they talk about shortly. But reading this book was really important to me. I felt like, wow, I'm listening to, I'm talking with, it felt like some men that like get it, who get that we're all better when each of us, whatever gender identification, are free to just fully be ourselves in the workplace. And so I actually reached out to Brad. Brad, I think you almost have a challenge at the end of the book, something about like, hey, I don't know, I like to sponsor or I like to support, women in leadership. So I literally reached out to Brad, and then that led to, after a series of conversations, to this gift today to be able to learn from both David and Brad. So let me first just say a little bit more about who each of these very distinguished men are in our midst today. Let's start with you, David. David Smith, a PhD, is also a co-author of the book I just showed you, and also the previous one, Athena Rising, and many other publications. Both of these men have so many different publications. And David is a professor and co-director of the Gender and Work Initiative at Johns Hopkins Carey Business School. I know you had a neat workshop in January. I was wishing I would have been around somewhere to see if I could have attended. And also, David has a long history in the Navy as a Navy pilot. My husband's a pilot, David, so he would be like all over that. And so David has been a squadron leader for lots of years, working with lots of different people there in the Navy. And you are where today, David? Tell us where you're calling in from.
I'm in Maryland, and I split my time between at Johns Hopkins between our Baltimore campus and our DC campus.
Awesome. Awesome. And I know we have a John Hopkins All Children's Hospital in St. Pete, Florida. So that's like a little connection where I have a little John Hopkins knowledge. Well, welcome, David. Thank you for your gift of presence and time today. And then Brad Johnson. And Brad's a clinical psychologist and the co-founder of workplaceallies.com. Brad also has a long time in the Navy and has been a commissioned officer in the Navy's Medical Service Corps, and then a tenured full professor at the U.S. Navy Academy's Department of Leadership, Ethics, and Law. And lots of teaching experience, Brad. I was in education for 18 years. Yeah, I want to know your secret tricks for winning all those educator awards and such, I see. So lots of different wonderful gifts that you each bring. So thank you again for being with us here on Dawn, for just discussing together with experts, what does it take for workplaces to work for women? So to start us right off, I think we need to ask why. Why are you each involved? I mean, you've had these long careers, you're very learned, you have lots of options of what you could be into. Why are you in this space of what does it take for women and men to work effectively together? What does it mean for women to thrive in the workplace? What's your why?
Yeah, I'll jump in really quickly. Good to be with you, Don. We've been looking forward to this. I think, and I'll let Dave sort of offer his own why, but for me, it was sort of a combination of both the academics. So I've researched mentoring, sponsoring relationships my whole career, and I've always seen the data and been curious about the data showing that women get less access. They
Mhm.
get lower quality sponsoring in particular in the workplace. And I've always been curious about the evidence that men are sometimes reluctant to engage with women in the workplace. And I think it was that curiosity that especially
Mhm.
got me collaborating with David early on in our work for Athena Rising, our first book, which was all about mentoring and sponsoring. How do we get men engaged? And what do women tell us they most value and appreciate? So that was the academic piece. And then the personal, there are women around me through most of my career in the Navy at the Naval Academy that, these are future warriors, they're future
Mhm.
leaders in combat. And it was always concerning and curious to me that not enough men saw women in terms of their capability, their strength, their ability in leadership. So I think it was the personal. I have a sister who was also in the Navy, so
Mhm.
the personal learning from women about gendered headwinds that they encounter. That was sort of an epiphany and a light bulb moment for me.
Okay, awesome.
Dave?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine very similar to Brad. I both an academic why and also a personal why. But for me, it started with the personal. My wife and I married shortly after we graduated from the Naval Academy, and we had parallel careers in the Navy. And of course, every once in a while we get a chance to be at home together, and we would have conversations about our experiences at work and talking about careers. And it was always really shocking to me just to hear how different her experiences were than mine. And
Mm.
that's everything from the interpersonal interactions that were going on with her peers and with the leaders that she worked with, but also from a career perspective of opportunities and sponsorship and mentoring and things that I took for granted in many ways because I never had to look too far for it. It just kind of came to me.
Mhm.
But for my wife, it was very different. It was much more challenging to find those. And it really also piqued my curiosity to see, were the women that I worked with, my colleagues, were they experiencing something very similar? And as it
Mhm.
turns out, they were. And so starting to connect those dots and understanding what was going on really, really drove my motivation to learn more about women's experiences and how I could be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And that kind of fed my interest and curiosity throughout my time in the Navy. Later on, as an academic like Brad, I think as a sociologist, for me, in studying gender, work, and family issues in organizations, one of my really areas of passion, I think, around the research has been around dual career families and really understanding in today's world the norms around dual career families and the
Mhm.
challenges we often face that are focused around gender roles and these very traditional gender roles that don't necessarily align with our relationships that we have today at home, but also in how we see each other in the workplace. And so that again was another way that I looked at this and said, we need to be working with men to help us to create the kind of change that we need to help women to advance and to be the leaders that they want to be and need to be in our organizations. But at the same time, allowing us as men to step into the other roles that we have and our other identities as parents, partners, and understanding that we can show up in those roles as well.
Wow, that's so important. And I'm sure that's going to come up even further as we talk. Like, what are these workplace structures? Like, what do we need to change so men can show up to be able to, for wife or partner, to be able to bloom the way that she would like to or that she's due to? What I noticed in each of your whys was this sense of listening. Like, I come from a process consulting lens, which is all about listening studies. And I'm a talker. So coach training and process consulting has been really important to me because it's helped me clue into listening to, leaders, or listening to what organizations are saying. And in each of your whys, it was this sense of, I heard, you stopped long enough to be able to hear something, you observe something, you ask questions. I mean, that in a nutshell is what I encourage organizations to do, to pause long enough to be able to assess. And then depending on what they find, what they listen to, how do we respond? Yeah. But in this time, in this particular time and place, 2026, wow, so much going on, right? Why is this topic mattering now? Does it matter the same? Does it matter less? Does it matter more? What would you say?
I think it matters. Well, it matters, period.
Matters. Okay.
And I think that the reason that it's especially, I think, important for leaders today to be thinking about this is that, the workplace is changing. And certainly I think a lot of the norms that we find in our workplaces today that have in some cases been influenced by COVID and this post-COVID world that we lived in, those things were there before. They were there before COVID. And now we've just learned a lot in the post-COVID world about the structure of work and what works for people broadly, right? For men, for women, right? I think it really opened our eyes to understanding that some of the structures around what we thought of, notionally what work has always been, although it hasn't always been that way, but it's been that way maybe in our own experience, in our own lives, and maybe the lives of our parents or grandparents that we think of. But that isn't the way that that doesn't necessarily work for everyone today, and the types of relationships. And I was talking about dual career families, which are the norm today in every country. That the workplace is not really organized to set up to support, and to not just support, but also help to support them in both their careers, but also an understanding that those careers are influenced by what's happening outside the workplace, and that we can't just stick our heads in the sand and say that what's going on outside the workplace doesn't matter and it's not important to who you are in your career, because we know that's not true. And so I think today more than ever, understanding what workers, employees, what we all need to be successful, to thrive, to achieve the highest levels of performance that our employers want as well, which helps our organizations become more effective and successful as well, that we really need to start listening to our employees and understanding what are their needs and how can we best support those. And in many cases, what we find, and we can talk more about this a bit later on, but we find that we need to change some of the structure of work, and yes, maybe the 9 to 5 and the traditional 5 days a week schedule isn't the schedule that works for everybody, especially in today's world. The world has become much more connected. It's faster today because of technology. We're much more global today, and we're working with distributed teams around the world today. So the being in one geographic location for a very specific set time doesn't necessarily work for everybody, and it certainly doesn't work for our families.
Right. Go
Hey, and
ahead.
just two data points to maybe amplify what